Welcome to the Future Christian Podcast, your source for insights and ideas on how to lead your church in the 21st century. At the Future Christian Podcast, we talk to pastors, authors, and other faith leaders for helpful advice and practical wisdom to help you and your community of faith walk boldly into the future. Whether you're a pastor, church leader, or a passionate member of your faith community, this podcast is designed to challenge, inspire, and equip you with the tools you need for impactful ministry. And now for a little bit about the guest for this episode.
Welcome to the Future Christian Podcast. Today we have a special Roundtable episode on women in ministry leadership, featuring 4 participants, including our very own Martha Tatarnic. Let me read through our guest bios. First, we have Reverend Tabatha Johnson, who is a pastor in the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. She has served as a pastor and chaplain for over 20 years. She's a graduate from the University of Missouri, Kansas City, and Central Baptist Theological Seminary. She's co-editor and contributor to the book Still a Mother, Journey Through Perinatal Bereavement, a 2017 gold medal winner in the Illumination Book Awards. She currently serves as a senior pastor at Shawnee Community Christian Church in Kansas, where she serves joyfully alongside people who love Jesus and one another. Her greatest love, besides her family and her church, are coffee and starting home improvement projects in her home that someday, hopefully, she will finish. Tabatha lives with her spouse Corey and their children in the Kansas City metro. We also have the Venerable Sheila Van Zandwyck, Archdeacon of Lincoln Deanery and the Rector of Church of the Transfiguration. Sheila was born and raised in St. Catharines, Ontario, and was raised in the Christian Reformed Church. She began attending an Anglican church in her 20s and started seminary at 40. She worked in retail for a number of years and was the manager of Shoppers Drug Mart. She's been ordained for 17 years and worked in churches in Oakville, Hamilton, and now St. Catharines, Ontario, and has been at Transfiguration for 6 years. Also, we have the Reverend Canon Katherine Morgan. Kathy graduated with a Master of Divinity from Trinity College, University of Toronto. She is ordained in the Diocese of Niagara, where she has had the privilege of serving in rural, small town, and city parishes for 29 years. Currently, she is the rector of Church of the Resurrection in Hamilton. In her free time, she loves to sing, enjoy puzzles, and is the proud parent of an adult son. Last but not least, we have our very own Martha Tatarnic, co-host and regular contributor to the show. A reminder, before we start today's conversation, please take a moment to subscribe to the podcast, leave a review, and share Future Christian with a friend. You can connect with Loren, Martha, and Future Christian on Instagram. We appreciate your voice and how we faithfully discern the future of the church. Welcome to the Future Christian Podcast. This is Loren Richmond Jr., and today I'm pleased to be hosting a Women in Ministry Roundtable discussion with a whole host of wonderful guests. First, we have the Venerable Sheila Van Zandwyck, then Reverend Canon Katherine Morgan, the Reverend Canon Martha Tatarnic, who you all should know, and soon to be joining us, having some technical issues, Reverend Tabatha Johnson. So hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us, Loren.
Great.
Let's go, I guess, based on how I'm seeing you all on screen. Kathy, is there anything else you want our listeners to know about you?
Don't even know where to start. I've been privileged. I've been in the same diocese, have had a chance to minister in both small parishes, country parishes, as well as city parishes. I've done lots of volunteer work from the diocese and in the community, which is lovely, which is also how I know some of these wonderful colleagues in ministry through some of the things that we've done together. I'm getting up there in years. I'll be 29 years. I've been 29 years ordained, and I feel at some point in time I should know what I'm doing after that long a time. But it's been a real gift and a real blessing to have had the journey that I have with good colleagues, good friends, and wonderful parishes.
Awesome. Sheila, how about you?
I think, are we talking call or just giving people general ideas about me?
Yeah, general ideas about you.
Decorating my house and doing gardening.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, right. That is kind of my that is where I like to be, is working at home. And I love a good renovation project, whether it's indoors or outdoors. I spend time I've got a brother who lives close by, spend time with him and his girlfriend, and they're great pets. In fact, I was pet sitting the other night. So I'm a dog and cat aunt. So yeah, that's a good thing. But yeah, I love ministry, love all the people that I work with and the opportunities that have been given. It's good stuff.
Awesome. And I guess everyone should know the famous Martha Tatarnic. Martha, anything else
Well,
listeners
I guess
need to know
like
about you?
Kathy hinted at, Kathy, Sheila, and I do all work together in the Anglican Church in the Niagara region. And we're excited to be joined by Tabatha today as well for like a non-Anglican perspective on the question of women in ministry. But yeah, I'm really grateful that Kathy and Sheila were willing to join us from Niagara today.
Absolutely. Well, let's get into that. Sheila, like you mentioned, kind of your call story, how you first were drawn into ministry and how that shaped you.
Do you want me to start?
Go for it.
So for me, it was kind of interesting because I was raised in the Christian Reformed tradition, and women are not, at the time that I was going there, women were not allowed to lead churches, be ministers, at all. So I had no familiarity with women in the priesthood or in the ministry and so I think that it's one of the reasons it took me a little while to kind of hear my call. I really didn't hear it until I was in my 30s. And by that time, I had been attending an Anglican church probably for about, a little over 10 years, I would say. And one day I had I had been leading a Bible study for years. I'd been, gone to church since my baptism, 2 months after my birth. So always been involved and engaged with the church and ministry and my faith life. And so I was leading this Bible study for quite a while. And this one woman kept saying, I think you should be a priest. And I kept thinking, really? I don't think you got that right. And so it took me a little while to kind of see myself in that role and to even begin to think about it. But literally, the day that I thought, oh, it just clicked and realized that was what I was called to, I went and spoke with someone who was very wise. And they said to me, well, what do you think the gifts of a priest would be? And I said, well, this, and this. She said, do you have any of those gifts? And I said, I kind of have them all. She's like, then maybe Sheila, you should be a minister. I'm like, well, maybe I should. And I really, once I said yes to the call, recognized, how strong it had been in my life and how much it meant to me. And yeah, it has been fabulous going forward from there.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. Kathy, how about you?
Actually started feeling a call to ministry when I was still just a teenager, which was a very strange thing for me. I was painfully shy as a young person. It's hard to believe. But I couldn't even make eye contact. If I had known you most of my life, I couldn't make eye contact. And so started kind of feeling this call to kind of be involved and engaged with people. I was involved a little bit in my church as a teenager, doing a few things liturgically, but kind of did quite a bit of work with the minister at the time. And he would take me to people's houses because, again, needed somebody else to go do some of those visits. He didn't feel comfortable all the time going alone. And so you got to that you could kind of talk to people and kind of walk with them, and to realize that was part of what I was feeling the call to do, is to be a part of people's lives in a very real and a very meaningful way, not just superficially or not just kind of liturgically, but to be able to kind of walk with people and journey with them and to remind them that they weren't alone in all of that. And so I kind of came out of my shell when I was about 18 and all of a sudden could talk to people and make eye contact and all those kinds of things. But some of that was kind of enforced and held up by the people around me. Would never have thought of this kind of idea on my own. But as I said, there were people kind of encouraging me and mentoring me and, pushing me out of my comfort zone to kind of fulfill and to use the gifts that I had been given. So it was a wonderful kind of affirming it from the community.
Martha, I don't know if I've ever heard this story from you, so I'm especially excited to hear your perspective on this.
Yeah, I also was a teenager. I was about 15, and I experienced that sense of call as being extremely inconvenient because I had other very firmly laid out plans for myself. I've always been pretty type A, and I had my life mapped out for myself in a way that did not include ordained ministry in any respect. But I just started to get this nagging sense that this was what I was supposed to do. And I fought against that for a time until it really felt like kind of a surrender to it. Like, okay, am I going to spend my whole life doing something else when I know this is what I'm supposed to do? But I think the thing that I've been thinking about so much lately, Loren, with that call is, because we've had some different guests on our podcast lately. Particularly, I'm thinking about the documentary around the Philadelphia 11.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm interested in like Sheila's note too, in terms of growing up in a church where there weren't women in leadership. Like, I'm really realizing over 20 years into ministry and almost 30 years since I started to discern that call, like what a privilege it was to grow up in a church where women had always been in ministry, and how much more that, like, that imagination is like unfettered because you see it as a possibility. And I think for Sheila, or for some of those trailblazing women in the Anglican Episcopal Church of England, who had to really like speak back against those voices that said, we don't do this, that I find that quite amazing. So I've been feeling a lot of gratitude as I sort of consider that privilege of growing up in a church where women had been ordained longer than I had been alive.
Well, that's a question I feel like I should ask off the jump. Is how do y'all think? How did being a woman affect that call discernment? Like, do you think it was harder for community recognition? Those sorts of things.
I think for me, it wasn't. I don't think it was harder.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was just harder for me personally to see myself in it. And it's true, Martha. Like I've heard conversations and read stories about people, and sometimes it's women, sometimes it's people who are poor, sometimes it's minorities, and how much we're starting to recognize if we don't show them opportunities at a young age, then they just don't even envision it. And really, if you don't envision it, it's not going to happen. So, I mean, I didn't even recognize I kind of had those blinders on, right? And that, that I needed to think about that and experience it. It was one of the things. Marion Vincent was, one of the people involved in my onboarding as an ordinand to go through the ordination process. And she kind of recognized that in my first few interviews, even still, after I had already accepted it, to say, I think I need you to go and work with a female priest who's been a priest for a while, and spend some time with them so that you get a better sense of envisioning yourself in that role. And so that's what she did. I had the privilege of working with Reverend Dorothy Hewlett, who was just wonderful. Spent, 4 months with her and just seeing how she was in that role as a priest, but as a female priest. What that kind of looked like, what she kind of worked against, and what she had to bring to the table as that. For her, I learned a great deal from her about pastoral care. Watching her walk into a hospital room with a sick person, it wasn't just a sort of standing there very piously at the bedside, reading this 23rd Psalm or something. She would walk right in, often hug them. How are you? Do you need anything? I watched her feed people pudding because they weren't able to, that was part of what she brought as a woman to ministry, I think, was that comfort and ease around offering that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Well, thanks for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
Kathy, why don't you share? And then we're welcoming in Tabatha here in a moment. Or Tabatha, while you're getting dialed in. Kathy, why don't you share about how you feel, any thoughts on that same question?
Because I've been at this a little bit longer, my early years in ministry looked a little different, and what that process looked like was different. I had the love and the support of my home parish, but that was a long time in coming because girls just didn't participate. You know, little bit. It was a little country church and a little church, and girls just didn't do stuff like that. Like you weren't allowed to be involved in certain things. Like there was a role for women and a role for men. And so that was also why this call to ministry was so strange because girls just didn't do that. I know when I was early in the process, I wasn't necessarily, we were all required to jump through the same hoops, but the expectation is that the men needed full-time jobs because they had a wife or a family to support. Well, I was married at the time, and so I could do a half-time job or didn't need a job as urgently as some of the other ones. And in fact, for the first 10 years of my ministry, I was in part-time positions because of that. So, some of that came with time, and it certainly changed over time. But I think being a young woman in ministry was, there were extra hurdles and there were a little higher hurdles at times, just because it was still, wouldn't say it was on the early edge of it because we've been doing it for almost 50 years now, but there were certainly still things there were times when it was holding me back because I was a young woman trying to go into ministry, ordained full-time rectorship
Yeah.
ministry, not a priest associate or a youth worker or, yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. Let's welcome in Tabatha here. Tabatha, we're discussing kind of our folks' call stories and then how you discern that call, and then especially talking about how that might have been more challenging or some additional hurdles you might have had to navigate as a woman.
Oh, wow, what a great question. So I've always been fortunate to be surrounded by women in ministry. In my childhood, we didn't really go to church. And so professionally, though, and I experienced a call to ministry, uh, I started at a church who had a woman minister, director of children's education, and the senior pastor was a woman. I'm fortunate to be in a denomination, Disciples of Christ, that is incredibly supportive of women in ministry. I am surrounded by colleagues that are women that have pastor positions. But I will say the church that I started at, attending in high school, where a church, they had ordained women since option, but good luck finding a woman as a pastor of anything but maybe a children's pastor. And not that there's anything wrong with that, because I adore our children's pastor. I think she's amazing. That was the limit. And be a pastor as long as you still supported a man's role. And the men were the senior pastors. Women could be youth pastors, they could be children's pastors, they could be chaplains, and the denomination would ordain women without any trouble. But finding a church and being a senior pastor, I didn't know any women or senior pastors who preached on the regular in and week out. So it wasn't until I already felt a call to ministry and started working at a church that I experienced in those more leadership positions. And honestly, since then, as both a chaplain and as a congregational minister, I've been incredibly fortunate to be days where we have women clergy for years, so to speak. Absolutely delight. And really enriched my experience. It's really challenged me better minister because I have all of these one examples. In our denomination, the last two general ministers and presidents have been women. And so I'm in a strange position where church that formed me didn't have that. But the church that I moved as a professional has nurtured my call. And I kind of have it in both.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. I
Well,
mean,
thanks for sharing that.
it's great. And I've also been a chaplain in healthcare. Of course, healthcare, has a lot of women to positions. I served in the military. That was mostly a male environment. I wasn't a chaplain. I had goals to be military. And so that maybe was a place where I experienced some resistance in ministry. But even still, it was.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, I'm in a
Yeah.
position where I am reaping benefits. Had to fight and who had to struggle, who faced challenges. I'm
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that. Martha, why don't you jump in here, share about how navigating that call experience for you as a woman was more or less challenging.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I was pretty naive actually in going into ministry because I just was raised in a church where women in ministry seemed like a normal thing. I have the interesting experience of being married to another Anglican priest, and we were ordained about a year apart from one another. So Dan began in ministry about a year and a half before I did. But I think that was the real wake up call for me, was just seeing the authority that was granted to him when he walked into a room that I was not accorded to me. My very first day on the job at St. Jude's in Oakville as an assistant curate, and I was wearing a collar and doing all of the things, but one of the women came up to me. We were hosting Vacation Bible School, and she came up to me and scolded me for taking the scissors. Because she didn't realize that I was the new assistant curate.
Yeah.
She just thought I was a member of the youth group. Let me tell you, nobody ever scolded Dan for taking the scissors from the newsletter table at his first parish, right?
Yeah.
But there's an upside to that. There's an upside to having to earn your authority with people. I think, Sheila, you kind of named it a bit in referencing our colleague Dorothy. There is a way in which you can be easy with people that has a lot of upsides, and I think that you establish authority just by being a good leader. You don't have to pull any punches or pull rank, and people don't necessarily place you on a pedestal just because you wear a collar and have a title. If you want people to respect you, then you have to earn it. And that's, I think, actually a pretty good thing in ministry.
So there's an interesting dynamic here in that Martha, Sheila, and Kathy all work in Canadian Anglican tradition, and then Tabatha and myself, Tabatha here on the panel, work within the Christian Church of Christ. We don't wear, in our clergy tradition, we don't wear collars. So I'm curious, Tabatha mentioned something already that I want to play off of. Do you think having representation, having mentors you could look to, whether it was growing up or in your early formative ministry, was that helpful? And then B, do you think having that symbolic authority of a collar or a lack thereof would have been helpful or was not helpful? So Kathy, why don't you start, and then Tabatha, you can talk about thoughts about collar or lack thereof, I suppose.
Been some wonderful mentors. Sheila mentioned Marian Vincent. I was a student with her when she was still in parish ministry and was one of my presenters at my ordination. And she had a beautiful way of just being authentically herself. And so as I was kind of trying to navigate a system that didn't quite know what to do with me, it was lovely to have that wonderful example of somebody just being 100 authentically who she was. And she could chair the meeting. She could go into the nursing home and untangle the wool while she visited and do everything in the middle. And so it was a lovely gift to see somebody who didn't try to fit into a mold or a cookie cutter. She just was who she authentically is in ministry. And so it was, and she'd just been named archdeacon, and so had some responsibility, and just, again, took that on as herself. She didn't, again, try to fit into any kind of a cookie cutter model, and just kind of claimed her authority and modeled that authority and just modeled being authentic in the midst of that. And so that was a beautiful gift as a young student trying to kind of define who I was and figure all of this out. It was an absolute gift to have somebody like her to walk with for a period of time and to be inspired by her. She still inspires all of us. I think I can say that quite clearly, the three of us who still have the opportunity to minister with her, that's a real gift. And I forget what the second part of the question was.
Like the collar. Do you think like having that kind of like external, I don't know what the word is. Like, do you think that helps?
It's a symbol. It's a symbol. Yeah. It did help because when I was first ordained, I had just turned 26 and I looked very young. And so to at least, even if people didn't always see that, like I like a nice full collar, so the nice round one, people thought I had a turtleneck on underneath something. So it didn't always work. But it did help a little bit. And it was more helpful, I think, when I went into things like hospitals. It was an easy symbol if you didn't always have your badge with you, or even if you did. It was helpful. I did a lot of funerals. There was a funeral home around the corner close to my first parish, did a lot of funerals. And so somebody they didn't know walking in, it was a symbol that people understood and recognized. And so, I used to joke, I used to have clerical pajamas. I wore them all the time when I was first ordained, and now less so. But there are times when having that outward symbol, and it kind of helps identify you. Maybe if you're in somewhere that people don't know you or are unfamiliar, or need to be able to quickly spot who is the one that we need to turn to or connect with. And so, when I go to somewhere new, I tend to wear it a lot for a little while, and then I back off a little bit. But it was, especially in the early days when I was, as I said, I looked very young as well. And so it was a handy symbol to have. Yeah.
Tabatha, how about you? Like, I'm just thinking, as Kathy was saying all that, like, I'm messing with my collar because when I was, early 30s, working my first solo pastorate, like I wore a tie a lot because, again, I was working in the United Church of Christ tradition. Oh, we may have just lost Tabatha.
We did, yeah.
Well, let's have this. Martha or Sheila, while she's getting back online, any thoughts on this mentorship or representation or, clerical collars?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I would agree with Kathy. I felt like I really relied on the collar when I was first ordained, and I found that less and less important as I went on and just kind of established who I was in the community without needing it. But statistically, like, we know that representation matters. We know it. Like, Malcolm Gladwell has done really interesting research on how people are judged when they're sort of the poster girl of like women's advancement versus when there's a team of women who are in leadership together, and lo and behold, you can be judged on your merits as a person and a leader, not as like a representation of an idea. I think that we're about 50 years into the ordination of women in the Anglican Church of Canada, and yet like our bishop right now is the first female bishop of Niagara. The Archbishop of Canada, we call them the primate. The person who just retired was the first female primate of Canada. Like, they are continuing to be those trailblazers who I think in a lot of ways get judged against a different set of principles that hopefully then paves the way for it to become just a normalized thing where you see women as people who are leading. And I certainly think I have been the benefactor. Is that right? I have benefited. I have benefited from the women who were sort of out there alone, in order to not feel so alone. And at the same time, I think I've had to do some things alone. Like when I was pregnant with my first child, there weren't other women in the church in this part of the world who were trying to lead churches and have babies. Like Kathy was a number of years ahead of me on that. And I sort of felt like I was by myself in that experience. And I had to navigate what that looked like. And hopefully each of the little things that we navigate will make it less lonely for the women who come after us.
Well, let's explore that idea of sacrifices that a woman had to make that a man might not have to make. But before we do, we got Tabatha back. Tabatha, we're talking about kind of those external representations. Like, when you were new in ministry, did you wear anything extra? Like I was explaining, like I would wear a tie when I was young in ministry as a solo pastor, just because I wanted to try to look the part for my much older congregation.
Well, we were talking about having a collar and things like that. And our, tradition, wear collars. I have a couple of women colleagues who do wear a collar for precisely that reason. So that pretty, who they, I haven't done that. And, I think in some ways it would have made things a little bit better because I have a face where I looked much younger than what I was. And so I would often run into situations where maybe age isn't due, being able to automatically be afforded. And I do think that external representation, with that, I have kind of a little bit of maybe maybe not quite forceful presence, but you certainly tend to know who I am pretty quickly. So that is something that if I could go back and change things, it might be something that I would utilize to make it a little bit easier. When I was in CPE, my chaplain training, that's something that I quite a bit is claiming my authority as son.
Yeah.
Not just in a hospital room, but that have certainly helped me have gone back to parish ministry. Yeah, certainly not a tie though.
Sheila, let's start with you on this. Like Martha brought it up. I'm sure you've all talked about it to some extent already. I mean, Kathy, you mentioned the idea of being expected to take a halftime call. Sheila, do you want to start with sacrifices that you've had to make, or perhaps you've seen others have to make, other women have to make, that a man would not have to make?
Yeah, I think for myself, because I'm not married and I didn't have kids, so I didn't have to do that. But, and I mean, Martha, a bit with your kids, but they were already a bit older. I have colleagues, that have young kids, and I do see the struggle that when I look at other male colleagues with kids of the same age, I don't see that same kind of struggle happening. So, the worry about taking time off and how they will be perceived and whether that will be kind of a black mark against them because oh, my child is sick and I have to take another day off because, and I think that that's not just in ministry. I got to be honest. I think that's across the board in the industry. It's really kind of sad in this day and age that still goes on, that, this whole sense that you're not supposed to have both, or if you do both, you're supposed to be somehow perfect and your children never get sick and you're wonderful. Mm-hmm. So I have seen that happen, for other people, other colleagues, within ministry and without, I would say. I think, for myself, I think so interesting. It kind of does tie in with the whole collar thing.
Yeah.
So I don't wear one very often because I was raised in a tradition where you're right. The minister wore a tie.
Yeah.
And even that, not all the time. Right. So not kind of seeing that and being somebody who always liked fashion growing up. And so, was very individual of my fashion. I actually did wear ties and bow ties in high school. Yeah. I was all of that, a bag of potato chips. So at least I thought. But as someone who liked to express herself in how they dressed, I'm like, you want me to wear what with what? Like, ugh. And the lack of femininity. In fact, I was interested by the response. I just said to somebody that I have a dress that I quite love, but it's longer and it's very floral. It's basically sunflowers and flowers all over it. It's very feminine. And I said, I've never worn this to work, to church on a Sunday because I don't know that it sends the right message. And it made me think, so like, what message should I be sending, or doesn't it send, or is that just in my head? And they kind of looked at me. Now it was another woman, but she's like, she kind of didn't get even what I was saying. She's like, why didn't you just wear it? And I'm like, well, isn't that interesting? Like, do I, even if I don't wear the collar, and I don't wear mine very often, I am also a woman of a certain age who deals with hot flashes on a regular and ongoing basis. Wearing a shirt like this does not help that. So I think that was one of the things that I kind of, as trivial as it sounds, but in some ways I felt part of my own expression of who I was being taken away a bit from it. And it's why I do wear them. Like Kathy says, it is very handy. Funerals, hospital visits, all that. People know who you are. They know why you're there and what you're doing. And that's really important. So I definitely do that. But I found more often than not, if I wore it outside of church, you just get odd looks. And the best is being in a Catholic hospital.
Yes,
And I was one time in an elevator with 3 adorable little Italian Nona grandmothers who you could just see never spoke a word of English, but were looking and talking and looking and talking. And I thought, oh yeah, honey, you just got to be in the Anglican church. Then it's okay. Also, the number of times people see me in that and ask if I'm Catholic. At which point I realized we're doing a very poor job educationally about the different denominations in the world with everyone across the board. But yeah, as funny as that sounds, there was that sense that I felt with that I had to give up a little of who I was, and that then I just wouldn't. So,
Kathy, let me ask you a question, kind of playing off what Sheila just said here. I mean, if you want to respond to the whole sacrifices thing too, and working part-time, that's fine. But I'm like, this is again, like something that I've had people compliment my suit, but I've never been like, if I was wearing a suit, but I've never had somebody be like, oh, Loren, should you be really wearing that to church?
Too much. I wore a lot of suits because that was kind of the thing. You wore suits with your clergy collar, or kind of a dress shirt like a shirt. So not too much. My mother occasionally commented that you're the minister and you're wearing a skirt above your knees. It wasn't that far above my knees, but she was horrified. The first time I went to talk to the bishop about a call to ministry, you wore a mini skirt to talk to the bishop. Like, she was just horrified. And again, it was like an inch. It was not well above my knees. It was an inch above my knees when I sat down. No, not very often. Sometimes you had to think what you were doing or where you were, because I'm just, in my first church, it was a little country church, and you might have to shovel snow help clear the sidewalk before the first service, because if I didn't do it, the 85-year-old with a bad heart would.
Right.
So you had to think of what can I wear so that if I needed to do that, I was prepared. So, you wore your heels were in a bag, and you wore your warm boots or your flat shoes, or or whatever. But no, there hasn't been too much. Sometimes people would comment. I got a lot of comments when I was pregnant about the baby and oh, you're so much bigger than we saw you last Sunday. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
That was a bigger issue. There were more kind of comments about what I was, oh, that's so cute. You found something to wear with your collar. But there was more comments, I think, when I was pregnant and more patting of the belly. Oh, the back door, shake your hand, pat the belly, walk out. Shake your hand, pat the belly, walk out. I don't know about you.
Sorry to bug you. Is there actually maternity collar shirts?
Well, my mom made me one.
No.
Because I couldn't find one.
They laughed at me when I asked about that when I was pregnant. So.
Right?
No,
yeah, it was
interesting.
See, and I feel like we're getting into some good stuff here. I mean, not good stuff, but the real meat of this conversation, right? Like this kind of like, I don't know, policing or control, or I can't think the right word of access. Maybe that's the word. To women's bodies, I suppose. Tabatha, do you want to jump in here with anything? And then Martha?
I do, because what I was sitting here thinking is, I can't wear anything too sexy. I think about that when I buy clothes. We're in a tradition where we have a robe and we have a stole, and so I can wear those on Sunday. I happen to be in a church right now where I don't robe up and I don't use my stole. But throughout my career, I have thought, can I wear this on Sunday? Can I preach in this? Is it appropriate to preach in? Is this too sexy to preach in? And I would imagine that probably our male counterparts don't think about, is this too sexy? Am I going to get comments about this? Does this neckline go too low? Are the sleeves too high? Is the skirt too short? Now
Like
I often preach in jeans, but I still think, are these jeans
Martha,
too tight?
Yeah, I'll totally pick up on that, because I actually have found
and I don't think
the public commentary about my body, my clothing, my clothing choices.
Easter morning, years and years ago,
pretty astonishing.
And I lose you guys
over the course of a couple of decades. And, I've said it a few times already in this podcast, but I went into all of this so naively. And I have been really surprised by the permission that people often feel to make comments on your weight, on your silhouette, on the shortness of your skirt, on, like before I got pregnant, people guessing if I might be pregnant. We started this conversation around sacrifice, and I don't want to sound like I'm sour grapesing at all, because their ministry has been full of joy and blessing. And I believe that I have experienced wonderful things as a woman, specifically in ministry. But yeah, I had to deal with maternity leave policies that weren't, up to date. And so when I got pregnant, in 2 different dioceses, there was no maternity leave policy in place that could help me. And I was just at the mercy of my local congregation in both cases, which were extremely generous to help me navigate that for my new family. I got told that I didn't have enough experience for jobs that then went to men who had less or the same amount of experience that I had. And the Anglican Church is a pretty closed circle. And I would hear whispers in back rooms, well, they didn't want to hire you because they were worried you were going to get pregnant and need a maternity leave. And each of those realities that I've hit up against have been shocking in their own way, because I just wasn't anticipating that kind of thing going into it. And I think that, as Tabatha was sort of getting at, I don't think that men worry about whether somebody's going to think that they look too sexy.
No.
I will say the one thing that I have found talking to male, and it wasn't an Anglican church. can't remember the denomination, was summer wear. Like if they chose to, be in jeans, even like during a work week, if they weren't I wear jeans. Nobody comments on me, but I've talked to male pastors who said that, or shorts in the summer.
Yeah.
Oh my God, the pastor in shorts.
Interesting.
It's cut, but I mean, you're right. It's much less than what we do. I would say the one thing, as I am still single, is dating is very interesting when you are an ordained. If you're a guy, you are you're desirable, because women and other men, depending on your sexual preference, think that, you're in a stable job. You're somebody who is, faithful, is a Christian, is giving, is loving. But when you're a woman and you are a minister,
you're weird.
Yes, thank you. And I mean, I am anyways, but let's be honest about
I didn't mean you specifically.
But it is. They don't know what to do with it, because you are in a leadership role, which they're not so sure about. And what does that mean? And how Christian are you going to be? And I don't know that men, when they date, when they are ordained, if they run into that same
That's interesting.
idea, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I can't say I've had to navigate that, thankfully. Kathy, anything from this conversation that you want to respond to here?
No, it's just, it's interesting that we're not that far apart in ministry and how long we've been ordained and engaged in the church. And yet it's interesting to see how far we've come in such a very short period of time. That Sheila's experience just a couple years after Martha and a couple years after me was so different, and good and different in a good way, but yet some things haven't changed. Yeah. I did a funeral where most of the family was Catholic when I was pregnant, and it just blew their poor heads, because they could kind of wrap their head around a female cleric, but I was like 7.5 months pregnant doing the funeral. And they're just like, just one thing too many to try and get your head around. Yeah. But as I said, it's interesting. And I think some things, like I've known male colleagues who get comments about their hair or facial hair, maybe not about what they're wearing, but that beard looks a little scruffy. Maybe it's time to shave it off or shape it up a little bit, or, looks like you're getting close to a haircut time. There's been comments like that, less about what they're wearing, but have certainly heard them kind of comment that they do get those kinds of comments, which is different. But but again, it's not, none of us are walking away unscathed.
I did shave for
people
y'all,
do feel entitled to wage
today, so
thanks, Loren.
Yeah.
Noted.
Yeah.
Well, Kathy,
so
since you're
I
kind
was
of
at a church.
hinting at it here, let's talk about that. Where do you see the most progress for women in ministry today, and where do you think change is still needed?
Oh my goodness. I think there has been a lot of change in that people are journeying into ministry. Like both Martha and I came in as young women, did this kind of straight through, did our undergraduates, did our master's degree, and went into ministry. I think there's a lot more permission for folks to come in when it makes sense for them. Lots of folks maybe weren't able to do the schooling, or were fought the call a little longer than she and I did. And so folks are coming to ministry with a lot of life experience, again, bringing who they are, and I think are welcomed and received wonderfully. The last couple of ordinations, we've had more women than men ordained. The last couple of ordinations that we've done here in the church, and Martha and I are both part of the candidates committee process, and I think we see more women in that process than men. A lot of times.
So it goes in waves, though. Like there are still waves where, like, we don't see a woman in those interviews for like a couple of years. Like it comes and goes, like I know I've been part of another diocese where we really had to make a concerted effort to just plant those seeds for women, because you have to be intentional, I think, about it in a way that that maybe we don't always realize, because again, we kind of get used to the idea that women can do these things, but we do have to keep being intentional about making sure that that is a narrative that women actually see as possible. Sorry, Kathy.
It's okay.
Didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's quite all right. All right. But as I said, we've seen folks kind of come into ministry and bring who they are. Again, they're not fitting in some sort of cookie cutter mold about what clergy should or shouldn't be like, because I think there was some pressure that you could be women in ministry as long as you kind of did it like how the men did it, or tried to do that as much as possible. That was kind of your way in. You could be a woman in ministry, but you had to kind of try to do it as much like the guys as you could. And I certainly see that that pressure being taken off, and the guys too. Like, people in ministry bring who they are, and there's not cookie cutters either. I think there's a diversity in that. I think we still need some equity. We still oftentimes, if there are part-time ministries, it's women leading them, being expected to take them regardless of what their situation is at home. You still see women kind of accepting those kinds of roles and not pushing for a full-time, or some of those bigger parishes. Martha has one of the large kind of quote unquote cardinal parishes in the diocese, but that's not been reflected in some of the other large parishes. Many of us, I'm quite happy in the parishes that I'm in, but it should be a person's choice about what kind of ministry they feel called to. And you still see, and not just in our diocese, but in other dioceses as well, like there's still that stained glass ceiling. People can go so far, and you see some exceptions, but for the most part, it's still men in a lot of those traditional kind of big parishes. I kind of wish they could see what you've done at St. George's and the ministry and the way that's changed and evolved over the years, to realize that it's a good thing to kind of open up understanding of what ministry could look like. Because I think the ministry that St. George's has now is very different than it did 10 or 15 years ago. And that's a good thing, that everything continues to change and evolve, that we bring who we are to ministry. And so to find ways, because it's tough. A lot of the women who are in process are having to do this part-time because they still have families at home, or they're still supporting the family income, and it's hard. And so it's taking them a lot longer because they're having to do this part-time as well.
That's right.
Sheila, anything to add there?
Yeah, I would say that oftentimes women do come in a little bit later after they've raised their family, because they may have heard a call at some point. But you're right, either the trying to get back to school thing doesn't work, or taking the time off, or just family responsibilities means that they do go into it a little bit later. I would say that, you definitely do see that happening a little bit. But yeah, at the same time, I would say, interestingly enough, both of the churches that I have been a rector at, I think they purposely hired me because I'm a woman. Because they had females in leadership, one of them for a long time. In fact, I don't think they can really remember what it was like having a guy in charge. And so, and I think that's important then, because I think part of it isn't just the leadership of the diocese or the church. It is the people in the pews, right? It is helping them, because I know other churches that would, really struggle with still at this day and age having a woman. They do it, but there would be, they'd have a few more struggles. Whereas, I was really blessed in the churches that I was in, that they had great women in leadership for a long time who led them extremely well and created just phenomenal environments, did so much around things that, they were more than happy to have another woman come in.
Yeah. Well, I got to ask one more hard question here, and I suppose it's hard because I'm kind of nervous to hear the answers. What impact have male colleagues had on your journey in ministry, and how can men be stronger allies? So, Martha, you want to go that first?
I've been really lucky to have a lot of really great male colleagues who openly define as feminists. I've had a number of male colleagues and associates here at St. George's, people who essentially report to me. I mean, my current colleague is a co-rector, but my previous male colleagues reported to me, and they made a really, they were extremely clear about being happy about that. And they were extremely clear in their messaging to the congregation and to people who might be tempted to come to them thinking that they were the person in authority to say, actually, she's the boss. And kind of delight in that, because they were people who were just fiercely committed to feminism in just a really like natural sort of way. It's been really lovely. And I think that does make a big difference. I think that's what male colleagues can do as allies. I will say that, and I think it takes a while to move this dial. I think that the Anglican Church of Canada as a whole is probably still locked a little bit in tokenism, in sort of electing women to positions of higher power in the church, or, having women in different places of authority in the church, and then patting themselves on the back and thinking that the job of equality is accomplished. And it's not. Like, it is an ongoing sort of need to again insist that women get to be leaders and get to be judged as leaders, as people, and as people who bring their own unique set of gifts to the table as people. Like, don't assume that just because it's a woman that therefore they're maternal and nurturing and going to be a certain kind of leader. I know lots of hard-headed, calculating women who, which is great. Like, there's not like one way of being a female leader. There's not just one soft, gentle way of being a female leader. So I think the more that men can just be on board with recognizing who we are as people, the more that we're going to get past that tokenism.
Yeah. Kathy, how about you?
It has come a long way. There have been some wonderful male colleagues that I worked with, whether it was my rector when I was a curate, kind of making sure that I wasn't seen as less than, that we were equals, and that there were opportunities given to me because I was the curate that needed those opportunities, not just because I was the new young curate. And there were occasions, and I didn't mind. If somebody needed a token female at the table, I was quite happy to be there because there weren't very many of us around at those days. But they were making sure that we were represented. So when there was a diocesan service, in those early days, it was a little bit of tokenism, but I do it because we needed to see it. We needed to be a part of it, and we needed to see it.
That's true.
And some of that became less than. Like, it's not as necessary because there's enough women in ministry that we need 6 people to do a service, and here are the 6 people who are doing it. So I think more and more of that I've worked with, I was a regional dean, which means you kind of chair some local clergy meetings. I worked very well with the male archdeacons, and we kind of divvied it up. These are your skills, these are mine. And there was a total respect for what I could bring to the table and what they needed from that role. And so it's been lovely. And I think people were less concerned in the early days. Like, we have to watch what we say now. No, you just treat everybody with the dignity and respect and mind your P's and Q's. It doesn't matter whether it's me or your experienced male cleric. So I think a lot in those early days, there were folks who kind of made sure we were pushed a little bit to the front to make sure we were seen and included. And I think that's less and less necessary in Niagara anyway. There are other places where you still need that a little bit of that tokenism, because that sense of course they've got gifts to bring to the table. Of course we'd include them. Of course we'd ask, isn't the default. When we see that, especially when you're doing stuff, when you have opportunities to do stuff on a national level, I am always very grateful for the diocese that I work in and for the way that what I bring to the table is respected and valued, because I still see that in colleagues that is not the case. Female colleagues that is not the case. So there's work to be done, but it's come a long way from where it was.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. Sheila, how about you?
Yeah, I have been, I have found the male colleagues, since I've been ordained pretty much across the board, really good. So I worked in the retail sector and including in management for many years before I got here. And that was a nightmare. There I was not treated in any way, shape or form. as though I had a brain, as though I had anything to contribute. In fact, the last job I had where I was manager, I was eventually let go for no reason, which means they offered me a lot of money. And I had already decided I wanted to go into the ministry, so I was good with that. So they hired another guy right after me who was a man. And then sadly, he died about 5 years later, and they discovered he'd been bilking them for tens of thousands of dollars for years. And I thought, wow, isn't it a good thing you hired a guy? Because but I would say that, in our diocese and I have colleagues in other dioceses, and yeah, sometimes there is definite struggles. And I've colleagues who are like me, archdeacons, so they're middle management, who still struggle with some of the male colleagues that they have. I think, but I find I was ordained with two other, male clerics, and we are friends to this day. They have my back 110%. I think they're great for that. I think that tokenism does need to go out the door. I think that our bishop being a woman, I think having her in the House of Bishops, which is all the bishops from across Canada getting together, she is a very strong voice for that, for being a leader, for somebody who has ideas, who takes on roles in leadership. And I think that has been a very good thing for the House of Bishops as a whole to kind of take note of and to start to make sure, because it is predominantly male.
Yeah.
Like decidedly dominantly male. So we need more female voices up in that level to continue, the important work. And I think, that there are, there are always going to be some men who are either intimidated by you or just don't know how to deal with you. But I think for the most, what I've noticed in Niagara is that they're pretty good. They're solidly on board with women in ministry and in leadership, and see us as being a huge asset. In no way do they see us also other ways.
And I'm looking at the time, and for sake of time, we should roll on into some closing questions here. Let me take a moment just to reintroduce for our guests who we're talking to. We have the Venerable Sheila Van Zandwyck. I just want to say the Venerable again, frankly, Sheila.
I want it on a T-shirt. I haven't been able to get that yet.
Yeah, you should.
I know.
We have the Reverend Canon oh my goodness, the Reverend Canon Katherine Morgan. It's the cut and the cut going together that's killing me. So my apologies. We have the Reverend Canon Martha Tatarnic, and unfortunately, due to technical errors, no longer with us, the Reverend Tabatha Johnson, who has been with us in spirit.
Yeah, I'm sure she's with us in spirit.
Yeah, she's with us in spirit. So these closing questions that are loosely based on our regular set of closing questions, which inspired by Martha, I've kind of tweaked these for our custom conversation here. So these are kind of meant to be quick hitters. So if you became the first female pope, what is your first official act? Kathy.
No, because I certainly do not aspire to any kind of role like that. I don't know. I think just an equality to be able to find a way to kind of to build a little bit more equality into their ministry. I know in some pockets of the world that's not an issue, but to kind of raise up so that that everybody's gifts and everybody's call to ministry, and that what everybody brings to the table that God has given them is valued and respected and honored. I think that would be, not that that's something you can kind of institute or wave a magic wand, but to see that what everybody brings to the table, the gifts that they've been given, are equally respected and valued and appreciated.
Yeah. Sheila, how about you?
Not just to ordain women, that would be in there too, but also to allow priests to marry. I've always found that in the Catholic Church, that is just one of the things that I see no reason for, nor do I find it helpful. I think that being in a loving relationship gives your ministry great strength. I mean, I do it singly, and I often wish I wasn't. It is the reality of my life, but there are times when I think, boy, it'd be great to come home to a partner who was there for me, right? So definitely allowing them to get married, have women priests, and they can have all the kids they want if that's what they like to do. And apparently they do.
Cool. Martha, how about you?
Well, just for the sake of adding to the list of things we're going to do, I would implement equal marriage.
Okay. There you go. There you go. Okay. What gives you hope for the next generation of women called into ministry? Let me start calling names here.
I think for me, it isn't necessarily just in ministry. I think what gives me hope is to see how our society is getting better about being intentional in helping young women be whatever they want to be. So helping them see themselves as a soccer player, as a professional hockey player, as a computer tech guru, as a NASA scientist, as a priest, as whatever they want to kind of, because there are certain industries that have been very male focused that, it gives me hope to see, the world kind of working to try and give women this insight that they have all these fabulous gifts. And my hope would be that the church also creates that opportunity and awareness for young women as well.
Okay. Well, Tabatha, we have Tabatha back here. So Tabatha, what gives you hope? What gives you hope for the next generation of women in ministry?
Oh, what gives me hope for the next generation of ministry? I mean, women I see so many young clergy women who are so eager and so enthusiastic. And we all know that the church as an institution and in society is facing incredible challenges right now. And a lot of us are frustrated and wondering what's next. And of course, none of us know what's next and what's that going to look like. But I see young clergy women who are so excited about being ministry, so enthusiastic about what the future is, and they make me excited, and they make me eager about what possibilities are. I see women who are dreaming new dreams for the church, and it is so refreshing. It's so refreshing to hear, here's what I love about the church. Here's what I'm dreaming about the church. Here's where I see God taking us, instead of, these ideas of, we don't know what's going to happen. The church is dying. Everything that's wrong with the institution. And of course, there is a reckoning that is happening right now. It's a reckoning that's been coming for a long time and is completely appropriate. And at the same time, it's like a psalm, right? Where there's lament and there's praise and there's celebration and there's joy, and it's all mixed up together. And so I think that is a wonderful thing about young women who are still seeking call in all of these challenges that we're facing, and so hopeful and so refreshing.
Yeah, great answer. Great answer. Martha, Kathy?
Yeah, I feel hopeful when I look at my daughter. I feel hopeful with like just a twinge of a downer in it as well. But I really respect how much like she and her friends don't take for granted the rights that they have, don't take for granted the opportunities that they have. They do live in a time and place, unfortunately, where they see women's rights rolled back in different parts of the world in a pretty alarming way. But so that's the downer part. But the up part of that is like just putting fire in their bellies that like they want to continue to fight for this. Like this fight is worth it. It's worth it. It matters. It gives us in the church such more holistic picture of who God is and how God works. And in the world, and in the church, it just means that, like, we get so many more gifts brought to the table. So let's continue to, let's not sit back and think this is one and done. It's not one and done. We have to keep speaking up. We have to keep fighting. We have to keep saying this matters. And I just love looking to her and her friends and seeing that fight in them. Like, they know it. They know this is worth it.
Yeah. Thank you. Kathy?
We're at a point in the end, and we've hit this point several times in the last 20 years, that we can't be doing things the way we've always done things. And so I think especially when you've got women who have brought some life experience, it'd be greater if we had more young women going into clergy. Wouldn't it be great, Martha, not to be still some of the younger women in the room?
I know. 2 decades later, my God.
It's been too long. But
it does allow me to feel like I'm drinking from the fountain of youth, I will say. But that's the only good thing about it. Go ahead, Kathy.
But as I said, we can't be doing things the way we've always done them. We need to be finding new ways of engaging, new partnerships, new ways of engaging our communities. And I think it's really wonderful that as women are coming into ministry, they're bringing the skills and the outside of the box thinking and the creativity, that there's ways that we can honor where we've come from, but there are new ways and different ways of moving forward. And I think women bring a lot of those gifts. We've had to fight some of those battles. We've had to do things kind of outside of the box to get to where we are. And so it would be lovely to continue to see women in ministry kind of bringing their authentic selves and, let's try it this way and let's do it this way, and bringing some of that passion and some of that joy and some of that, we're being faithful to who God has called us to be. So let's just get down to it, and it might not look the way it's always been, but it's still faithful. It's still of God, and it's still kind of spreading the good news, but we're just going to do it in a little different way. And so to be able to encourage people to keep bringing those gifts and that ministry and that passion. Because you're right, after, Tabatha, after a while, you do kind of get curmudgeon-y. I've been ordained long enough. I feel like a cranky person in the back of the room sometimes, but it is so lovely, people who still have that joy and that excitement. You're like, nah, just wait till the church gets all of them. But it's catching, and it gives me. It means that I don't always have to be the cranky one in the back room. Well, in my day, but it's lovely to see that, and to see people honoring that and welcoming that, instead of kind of begrudgingly accepting it, but to really welcome that we need to be doing things in new ways, and that's part of how we're bringing that fresh air and that new energy into the church, is with people who bring who they are authentically into ministry, and to celebrate that. And I think we're going to continue to see more and more of that as we continue to adapt and adjust moving forward.
Awesome. Okay. Well, Tabatha, I got to give you this one because this is the most important question, and you weren't here for it. If you were the first female pope, what is your first official act?
Oh, to allow queer clergy.
Okay. She's concise, at least, right?
To allow queer clergy. I am in a denomination that has not completely moved past some of the struggles of the past, but I am in a church. Our polity is such that each congregation gets to choose what they want to do, whatever the general church decides. And so the general church is open and affirming, but we still have congregations that are not. But I happen to be in a congregation that is unabashedly open and affirming, says, all of God's people have right not just to exist, but to feel accepted and to know they are beloved by God. And by golly, when they walk through these doors of this church, they are going to feel that, if nothing else, they are going to feel accepted and loved by God. And so to be in a place where we deny the gifts that queer clergy bring, I think is a shame, and I think is a sin of the church, not just the Catholic Church, but all institutions that do so. And so even before saying women should be clergy, which you think maybe that would be first on my list, queer folks who are involved in loving relationships because we already know they're a queer clergy in Catholic Church, right? I mean, come on.
Mm-hmm.
And so they can be open and be who they are and say, this is who I am, and I'm God's beloved, and I have a call, and I'm going to live into it. I can't we be in a place where that happens? Unfortunately, it's not just a Catholic thing. But if I were Pope, by golly, I would do a lot of things. But that was one of them.
Well, that's why I always limit it to the traditional question of one day, because, we want more of the conversation than just what you do in Pope. But thank you. Thank you for sharing. Thank you all for this conversation. I really appreciate everyone's patience. And, getting all this together is an important conversation. I hope it's been helpful for our listeners. Martha and I, we always have a tradition. We leave people with a word of peace. So may God's peace be with you all.
Also with you, Loren.
With you.
Thanks for joining us on the Future Christian Podcast. The Future Christian Podcast is produced by Resonate Media. We love to hear from our listeners with questions, comments, and ideas for future episodes. Visit our website at future-christian.com and find the Connect with Us form at the bottom of the page to get in touch with Martha or Loren. But before you go, do us a favor. Subscribe to the pod to leave a review. It really helps us get this out to more people. Thanks, and go in peace.